you know, I let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go, and one day I just exploded. Hey sailors, welcome back to Cruising as Crew. My name is Lucy and today we're going to be talking about all of the roommates that I have had over my time working on cruise ships and what I have learned from each one. But before we start, I just want to thank everyone who has subscribed, everyone who is commenting, liking, sharing these videos. It really means the world to me. And yeah, keep on doing it, but thank you so much. And let's get into the video. So over my 4 years on ships, I have had 11 roommates, excluding Virgin Voyages because I have my own cabin on there, which is amazing. But yeah, so I have had 11 roommates. Each one I have learned a great deal from. So we're going to start from my first roommate to my most recent roommate. I am not going to give their real names away. I'm going to make up a name for them, but I'm sure they'll know who they are if they watch this. On my first ship, I was working for Steiner in the spas on board the cruise ships. So the standard thing would have been for me to join and share with another girl who worked in the spa. However, for whatever reason, all the spa cabins were full, which meant that I had to share with a girl from another department, and she was in the photography department. Now at first I remember thinking like, oh, this is a bit rubbish because I'm not, you know, with anyone from the spa, and normally you're kind of buddied up because it's such a huge change to live on a ship. You kind of need someone to be your roommate and show you what's what. But I kind of had to figure it out for myself because I was buddied up with a photog, and although she was lovely, we obviously worked completely different hours in completely different departments. The photographers are allocated smaller cabins than spa staff are. So I was in this tiny cabin with this girl called ELLIE, and I mean, to be honest, that is actually the smallest cabin that I have ever been in. So on the bright side, I kind of started from the bottom and then worked my way to bigger cabins and now in my own cabin. But it was definitely a shock to the system because it literally was a shoebox. Now ELLIE was a nice enough girl, we got on okay. We weren't like best of friends, we were very different. When I joined my first ship, I was very shy, and she was also quite shy, so we weren't the most talkative people. But you know what, this was kind of a good thing because when you work in the spa and also as a photog, you spend all day talking to passengers and to people. So when you get back to your cabin, you do sometimes just want to sit in silence. So it was actually quite nice that we didn't really feel the need to speak to each other. Now, I am not the cleanest person in the world, but ELLIE was particularly messy. If you live like in a big house or a big space, you can kind of get away with being messy, but when you live in an area as small as we did, it's quite imperative that you keep it somewhat clean because, I mean, even if you leave a hairbrush and a hairdryer out, it looks messy because it's so small. Whereas ELLIE, I remember she had a thing about fresh bed sheets. I mean, don't we all? A fresh bed is the best thing ever. But she would change her bed sheets every like 2 days. She wouldn't get rid of the old sheets, so they would just like pile up in the corner of the room. There would be like 5 sets of bedding just piling up in the room. And I remember there was a few times when I actually took them to the laundry because I was just like, I would rather just do it myself than have them sat there. But obviously she didn't mind them being there, and she would leave her clothes on the floor, you know, so I would come in from work at like 10 o'clock at night sometimes, or if, you know, if we went out to the bar, I would come in at maybe 1 o'clock in the morning and trip over stuff because there was always stuff left on the floor, and this got really tiring. But I would do literally anything to avoid confrontation, so I just kept my mouth shut. And then she got a boyfriend, and I really liked this guy. He, you know, really nice guy, didn't have a problem with him, but he basically moved in. I mean, I was living in a shoebox with 2 roommates. When I say moved in, I mean he moved in, like his stuff was in the wardrobe. He also left his stuff on the floor. There were times that, you know, I didn't realise she'd gone to work and left him in bed. I would have a shower, get out the shower, and be getting dressed, and then realise that he'd been there the whole time. So it's like, oh. And once again, I let this go on for ages without saying anything. And it was only when someone said to me, doesn't that bother you? And I was like, yes, it bothers me. But I didn't say anything for ages. I think I actually piped up and said something like 2 weeks before she left. So I had put up with it for ages. And then 2 weeks before she left, I was like, can you take those dirty sheets to the laundry, and can we maybe not have your boyfriend living in? But the thing is, it was my fault because I hadn't said anything. She had moved her boyfriend in, and obviously it would have been nice if she'd asked me, but I think she thought, well, because Lucy hasn't said anything to me about it, she must not mind. Same with the bed sheets. Because I didn't say anything about it, she must have thought, oh, well, she must not care. But the whole time I was stewing and boiling up about the fact that these bloody bed sheets were left in the corner of the room all the time, and I had a third roommate. Now, I thought I learnt from this, and I was like, okay, I need to obviously speak my mind more. Because really, like, it wouldn't have been a confrontational conversation. I was just too much of a wimp to do it. I think the thing is, there was one girl who I really got on with on my first ship, and everyone else who I worked with, I had a really hard time with them. You know, just the being left out and all of this. Nothing too severe. But obviously that takes up a lot of emotional energy. And when you get back to your cabin, you don't want to have to deal with it. So I think a lot of the time I was just like, I cannot even be bothered to bring it up. I'm just gonna go to bed and forget about it. The thing is, you let things go, you let things go, you let things go, and they build up, and eventually it all comes out. So that was my first scenario of a roommate. So she was a lovely girl, but we were not compatible living together. But it would have been a lot better if I'd have just spoken my mind. I'm sure she would have obliged. On my first ship, I had made a friend called Millie who worked in the casino. So when Ali left, I had organised it for Millie to move into my shoebox of a cabin. And I was really excited about this because Millie knew all about the untidiness, the boyfriend moving in. So I was like, this is going to be amazing. We're friends, we get on really well. She knows what I like, what I don't like. I know what she likes and what she doesn't like about her roommate. So this is going to be smooth sailing. And you know what? It was. The only thing is because she worked in the casino and I worked in the spa, we worked totally opposite hours. So I worked all day and then obviously slept at night, and she slept all day, or not slept all day, but you know, had all day off and then worked all evening and night. And while this was brilliant on the one hand, because a lot of the time we were alone in the cabin, when I finished work and came back, she was at work, so it was like having my own cabin. However, you know, if I needed to come in the cabin during the day and she was sleeping, I couldn't come in and turn all the lights on, and the same for her. If she wanted to come in the cabin during her dinner break working in the casino, I would most likely be asleep. But for the most part, it worked really, really well. The fact that we worked in different departments but lived together, because you don't see each other a lot, and so when you do see each other, you have a lot to talk about. So with Millie, I definitely learnt to appreciate how good it can be living with someone who works in a different department. So I got transferred to join my other ship in Singapore, and I was once again put in a cabin with a girl who worked in a different department. She worked in the next cruise department, so she sold cruises to passengers, and her name was Lily. Now Lily was a little Chinese girl, and she was so unbelievably kind and lovely. And when I got to this new ship, I was so negative, I was so angry at the world. I'd left my first ever cruise ship, and for anyone who works on cruise ships, you know that you always have this thing in your heart for your first cruise ship. So I was absolutely devastated. I couldn't believe this had happened to me. I didn't want to be on this ship. I just spent 6 months trying to make friends, and now I was like, now I'm gonna have to start from scratch. So poor Lily, I bet she was thinking, bloody hell, who is this grumpy bitch that's come to live with me? But anyway, I got over my grumpiness because the people I worked with in the spa were so much nicer. I enjoyed work a lot more, and also my cabin was a lot bigger, and honestly, it sounds really silly, but you'll be surprised at how much difference it makes if you have a bigger cabin. The cabin I was in on my first ship, the floor space was probably 1 meter squared. So there was enough room for one person to get changed at a time. Whereas living with Lily, this cabin was a lot bigger. We could both get changed at the same time. We could both do our makeup at the same time. We became very close very quickly, and she was very motherly. You know, she had been doing ships for a long time. She knew I was a first contractor. I had no idea what I was doing, and she really took me under her wing. I must say, out of all the people that I've had to say goodbye to, she was the hardest person that I've ever said goodbye to. The reason is she's from China and she doesn't work on ships anymore, so the likelihood I'm going to see her again, hopefully I will, but you know, it's quite slim, and we both knew that at the time. So saying goodbye to Lily was absolutely heart-wrenching. But anyway, so I stayed with Lily until I finished that contract, had a vacation, and then went on to my second ship, which was my second contract with Steiner. And I was back to the small cabin. It was absolutely tiny. However, this was the first time that I was going to share a cabin with someone who worked in the same department as me, the spa. So she was called Ellie, she was from Jakarta, and she was a lovely, lovely woman. She was a bit older than me, so I was a little bit nervous about that, but it worked absolutely fine. And what I learned from Ellie was that if you know the right people, you can get anything. Ellie was friends with everyone. She had worked on ships for quite a while, and she'd actually been on that particular ship for the last 3 years. So she really did know everyone, and everyone kind of looked to her as like a motherly figure. Her husband was a chef. So we would finish work and I'm saying, right, I'm going to go to the mess. And she's like, no, I've got dinner for us. I'm like, okay. I'd go back to the cabin and there would be 2 gourmet meals. I mean, there'd be like lobster, these beautiful chocolate cakes, like things that you just don't get if you're a crew member. But because she knew the right people, we got all the food. I gained a lot of weight that contract, no regrets. She was really good friends with people in housekeeping, so we would get our cabin cleaned and we didn't have to pay anything for it because she knew the right people. We did tip them. We got our sheets changed, got our bathroom cleaned, food was delivered to the cabin. She would get Wi-Fi vouchers. We would get bottles of wine. Like, it was just crazy, and I was like, oh my god, this really is mad. It was never for me, it was always for Ellie, but I was just lucky that I was her roommate, we got on, and she was willing to share. But I couldn't believe it. I mean, every day something would be delivered to the cabin that we didn't ask for, we didn't pay for. She knew all the right people. I was like, right, I need to network. Ellie had a husband on board, and obviously she wanted to live with her husband rather than a 20-year-old English girl. So the opportunity came for her to move into a cabin with her husband. So this went ahead and she left along with her lobster and clean sheets. And I got a new roommate, so let's call this girl Abigail. We've spoke about Abigail in another video, but we're gonna bring her up again. I worked with Abigail in the spa as well, and we got on really, really well at work, but obviously that was because we didn't live together. Abigail was significantly older than me, which is not a problem, but all it means is that we want very different things. I was very young and still wanted to go out, party, get to know people, and she wanted to finish work, go to bed, which absolutely isn't a problem. You do what you want to do, it's your cabin as well. However, Abigail had a lot of demands, and because I hadn't learned from my first experience with Ellie, I met all of her expectations. I had a curfew, people weren't allowed in the cabin, I wasn't allowed to spray perfume, wasn't allowed to dry my hair, and a lot of other things. Because I was so caught up in making her feel as comfortable as possible, you know, respect your elders, the cabin's 50-50, you've got to make sure that she's comfortable. But it got to the point where it wasn't 50-50. I was living in her cabin. And once again, that was my fault because I hadn't spoke my mind. I just carried on going along with things, trying not to rock the boat. I let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. And one day I just exploded. I mean, I know why it happens, but it was wrong. Like, if I'd have just spoke my mind at the time, I wouldn't have ended up going apeshit. But I finally learned the lesson that it's better to just say what you think rather than let it go. So although living with Abigail was really difficult, it was necessary because I learned a lot. You know, we don't grow from the good stuff, we grow from the hard times. But I have spoke more about my experience with Abigail in my video on how to deal with an awkward roommate, so I will link that down below and you can go and check that out afterwards. And also comment below if you've worked on ships and you've had an experience with a really awkward roommate. After my explosion at Abigail, it became very awkward to live together, so I moved out into a cabin with my friend called Mel. She worked in the spa as well, and this is where I developed my love for the Scottish accent. Yeah, Mel was from Scotland and we were a similar age, so we both wanted to go out, have fun. We both liked to talk about the same thing. We just had more in common. And I learned a lot from Mel because she is very direct. There's no beating around the bush. She says things how they are. And up until this point, I wasn't like that. I was the absolute master of beating around the bush to protect people's feelings. And she taught me just, you know, to just say it how it is. And we worked really, really well together. And I actually can't remember ever being annoyed with her or us having an argument. But I think that was because we were really open with each other. So if she did something that did annoy me, I wasn't afraid to tell her, because she wasn't afraid to tell me if I did something that annoyed her. And that was a really healthy dynamic. I think Abigail was a dynamic that I was like, I cannot let that happen again. And Mel was really an ideal dynamic in that we would just say it how it is. So neither of us were going to stew about anything because we were happy to talk about it with each other. Mel finished her contract and a really good friend of mine, Hannah, moved in with me. To this day, Hannah is one of my best friends. I love her to death. So I would definitely say that she was my favourite person to live with. But this isn't to say that we didn't have our tiffs, because we did. I really annoyed her, she really annoyed me, but luckily at this point I had found my voice and we were both able to speak our mind. So we did have quite a few arguments. We got it out into the open and then just let it go. You know, we didn't hold grudges, but I always remember that she had this hook that she used to hang on the front of her door, and she would just hang loads of clothes on it, and I don't know why it really bugged me. And I'm like, why can't you just hang the clothes inside the wardrobe so you don't have to look at them? But she really liked this hook. But actually I think she just kept the hook because it really annoyed me. But there was definitely things that I did to annoy her too, and you know what, if the worst thing she did was have a hook of clothes, then it wasn't that bad. In my video of how to deal with awkward roommates, I actually say in there, don't move in with your friend. And the reason is because sometimes you can get on really well outside of the cabin when you don't live together, but then when you do live together you realise that they have habits that you are just not compatible with. Like if they like to get up at 6 in the morning and you don't, but the alarm goes off every day at 6 in the morning. Or like if they have a hook. Sometimes it can work really, really well. It only works well if you are able to communicate. If you're really good friends with someone but you know that they don't take criticism well, or they take it really personally if they're ever told that they're doing something wrong, it's probably not a wise move to move in with them, because you have to be able to tell them when they're annoying you. And if they're going to get upset or go in a mood every time you say that, then it's not going to be an easy situation. So all I say is, before you move in with a friend, just have a think about whether you really can be truthful with them. My fourth ship, I moved in with a girl called Karen from Mexico, and she was just so lovely. This was my first contract working in the shop, and she also worked in the shops with me, and we got on really well. This is where I developed a love for Spanish music. She always had Spanish music playing and I just loved it. It was brilliant. This was the first roommate where I went in and literally, like, some of the first things I said was, tell me what you don't like. What are your pet hates? And I told her my pet hates, and we had this conversation about, you know, if I'm annoying you, please tell me. If you're annoying me, I'm going to tell you. We need to be open with each other. So this was the first time that I had kind of set boundaries and asked her to tell me. Because, like, looking back to my first few roommates, if they had have said to me, if I ever annoy you, please let me know, I probably would have. But because they never said that and I wasn't outspoken, I just didn't say anything. Sometimes just by telling someone that it's okay for them to tell you if you're annoying them, it makes it a lot easier to do so. And honestly, with every roommate since, I've done that and I've never had a problem since. I really think when you're going on a ship and you move in with someone, it's so important to tell them what you like, tell them what you don't like, tell them what really annoys you, and tell them that it's okay for them to say if you're annoying them, and that it's okay for you to tell them if they're annoying you, and, you know, not to take it personally. After Karen, a girl called Helen moved in with me, who also worked in the shops with me, but she was my assistant manager. Helen is still a very, very good friend of mine, and we worked really well together because, once again, we were both very open with each other. However, the only thing I would say is Helen was the assistant manager, and it's very difficult to live with someone who is your boss, because in the cabin you're equal, but at work she's your boss. And I was very lucky because Helen is able to separate those two worlds, professional and personal. But if you have someone who kind of sees it all as one, and you want to tell her that something's wrong in the cabin, you don't want that to affect you at work. Because I remember there was a time when, I can't remember what Helen was doing, but there was something going on in the cabin, but I didn't want to bring it up because I don't want that to be taken into work. For a long time living with Helen, I did feel like I never left work because although, you know, we got on really well, we had great conversations, we're great friends, I was always aware that she was my manager. But this is where I learned one of the biggest lessons I've learned on cruise ships, which is how to separate your personal and professional life. And I've made a video on that, so I will also link that down below as well. It's really interesting because, as I said, it's so important that you are able to separate the two worlds. If you have a personal issue, you have to not let that affect your professional relationship, and that is so difficult to do. But I really love the fact that I did live with Helen because we're great friends, but also because I got to learn this lesson. So I went on vacation and then I came back to the same ship and I lived with a girl called Maya, who is the happiest person. She's always able to put a smile on anyone's face. We'd get up at 8 in the morning, get ready for work. We'd be walking down the crew corridor going to the mess for breakfast, and I would still be trying to open my eyes and she'd be like, "Morning everyone, hello, it's a lovely day." Obviously no one else was doing that at 8 in the morning. She was able to just be happy and spread love all the time. Even if she was going through a hard time, she was able to put that to the back of her mind and concentrate on making everybody else's day brighter. And she had the most contagious laugh and everyone loved her because she was just so happy and go-lucky and enthusiastic and ready for anything. I would say I'm a pretty happy person anyway, but I'm not very good in the mornings, I will admit. It was so refreshing to just be around that positive energy all the time. It was amazing. So with Maya, she definitely taught me how to put things to the back of my head and put on a smile. Instead of maybe being not in the best mood and putting on a fake smile, she taught me how to really put it to the back of the head so that it was a real smile and you were actually happy. She was like, you can think about it later. Whatever's going on, it's still going to be there later. I'm like, yeah. So yeah, Maya was just a breath of fresh air. And everyone who meets her will tell you the same thing. And then my last roommate was a girl called Isabelle, and she was from Belarus, and she was the most beautiful girl. By this point, I had kind of mastered being to the point. And Isabelle, being from Belarus, was very to the point. I mean, I don't think I've ever met someone so confident. And not like cocky, just confident and so self-assured. You know, they say that you become the people that you surround yourself with, so I think it was really good for me to surround myself with people like Isabelle and Maya because they were just so happy and so confident and so happy with themselves, and it rubs off. She had had a very full life and it was so amazing listening to all her stories, learning from her stories, and she taught me a lot. She taught me a lot just about being confident and being okay with who you are and not caring what anyone else thinks. So those are my 11 roommates, and they have been a mixture of, not, I wouldn't say good and bad, but just more pleasurable and less pleasurable. I wouldn't change it for the world because even with the more difficult ones, I've learnt some really valuable lessons. But I really hope you have enjoyed this video. Go and take a look at my awkward roommates video and my how to separate professional and personal life video. But please let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions for other video topics or if you have any questions about roommates. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all the support, and I